Let's start by making our file. So when you open up Photoshop, you'll get something that looks like this. What you need to notice is on the left side, we have this button Create New, or we have the button Open. Because I haven't opened something recently in Photoshop, usually they appear somewhere down here, your recent files. So let's go to Create New. And when you hit New, you're going to get a pop-up menu that gives you a bunch of different options. So one thing that I do recommend is if you know what this file is going to be called, you can leave it as untitled, as it says right here, or you can preemptively name it. So I'm going to quickly type in test uh, underscore test 01. It's kind of a regular naming mechanic that I use in my work. Usually I'm doing a lot of projects with multiple pages, so I put the title, underscore, and then the digits. So the type of document is something that you can mess with. There's a few different set items like web, film and video, iconography, art, and illustration. You can also make your own customs. So where it says save preset, if you have a specific file type that you know you're going to be using over and over again, you want it to be the same width and height, resolution, you can save it as a preset. So if I say click Save Preset here with the name test01, it will save this exact setup as a template to come back to over and over again. So you can see I've got a few different ones here, one for a project, one for a basic web layout size, but we're going to make something specific. So let's go into our width and height section. So you can see that there's a number box here and then a drop down menu with different options. It's really up to you what you feel comfortable working in. Most people work, I would say, either in pixels or inches. Picas are also common. It's a little bit of an older measuring unit, but there's centimeters, millimeters. Obviously, I'm from America, so it's inches for me, but let's go pixels. And here you can click, select, and then enter new pixels. Let's say 1,000. And then I'm going to hit tab on my keyboard to go down to the next one and enter 1,000 because I want this to be square. So now I've entered it as 1,000 pixels. And if I go to the drop down and choose to switch it to inches, that's weird. It decided to keep that as 1,000 inches. So you can see that it changed this one from 1,000 to 13.89. So it's interpreting these things. But I'm going to go back to pixels, and you can see now that I've switched that, the 1,000 inches here got turned into 72,000 pixels. I definitely don't need one that big. So let's go back to 1,000. And one thing you might notice down here in the right corner is that this image size is changing as I change the pixel sizes. Keep in mind that this image size here is of the blank file, so when you continue to add information to the file, it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So next up is resolution. A quick word on resolution is the standard for web images, or the lowest standard for web images, is 72. DPI is also resolution. Resolution is DPI, or dots per inch. We are going to be making a higher res image. If you think you're only going to be making images for the web, 72 DPI will serve you fine, but you'll find that when you make a file at 72 DPI, you cannot reproduce it cleanly. So the standard resolution for anything that's going to be printed is 300. Absolutely the baseline standard of any image that's going to be printed. Now, you can also go up in resolution. And I just went up to 600. This will make your image much bigger, but it will also give you that much more pixels to work with. So if you want to make something that's very finely detailed, you would up the resolution. One reason to have a higher resolution is that your image can be made larger. So the thing to remember about resolution is you always want to go down. You never want to size something up if possible, because when you size something that is, say, 300 dpi to be 600 dpi, that image is making up pixels because it doesn't have 600 pixels per inch to reference. You're saying, make up 300 more because I need you to be bigger. And that's when your image gets blurry, gets weird, gets crunchy even. So I recommend, if you're going to go up in resolution, always remember to go up in sort of divisions of 2. So I always start at 600 if I want something a little bit higher res than 300. If I want something to be extremely high res, say if I'm scanning original artwork, I'll go to 1200 dpi. So when I reduce the 1200 dpi to 600 dpi, that's a very even mathematical number for Photoshop to figure out. I've always been told, do it this way: 1200, 600, 300. So we will go to 300. And the last thing I would say that you need for a basic understanding of Photoshop is to look at the color mode. This is something you can also tweak and change within your image after you create it. This is just the preliminary step. You can always change it later. Is RGB or CMYK color. If you, for some reason, are going to be working in the more specific grayscale or bitmap, that you can also change later. For web images that are going to stay on the web, that are not going to be printed, RGB is the language of our digital displays. So RGB is the color language that a screen works within. So that's what screens understand. When you go to print something, that color language is CMYK. So cyan, magenta, yellow, K for black. And that is something you would work with when you export a file to be printed. So if you work in RGB on the file before it goes to print, you want to switch to CMYK. So RGB is perfect for what we're about to do. We have a few more options here. This is the background contents. The standard default is white, so we can change that later. These more advanced steps, this is something that when you get further along in digital drawing, or you're working a very specific project, maybe with a client, that you might want to mess with these. Right now, the width, height, resolution, color mode is all you need to know before you get started. So the height, the width, my resolution is everything I want it to be, and we are going to hit OK. Voila, here is our file before we start working.